Welcome to the seventh episode of the Earkick podcast. I'm Karen Steffen, co-founder and COO of Earkick. Today's guest is Jamal Rizvi, a mental health social worker who believes that mental health should be attractive to everyone and not a luxury for just a few. Jamal, you're a mental health social worker, but you're also a podcaster and painter. What made you go into mental health?
I went into mental health through a voluntary route to start. So while doing my day job, I got involved with a mental health charity because it was just something that I cared about. And then gradually over time, I found the volunteering was grounding, kind of made me aware of all of the other stuff going on outside of my own world and potentially how many people there were out struggling with their own mental health or that just needed support. Over time, I got more invested, so decided to move full-time into mental health because I feel like it's the best use of my time right now.
That means that you are also studying right now. Is that correct? Can you speak a bit to that?
Yes, that is correct. So I am studying a postgraduate degree into social work while practicing as a mental health social worker. And the training itself uses what's called a biopsychosocial model. So takes like bio as in the biological circumstances of a person, the psycho as in what's going on in their mind, and then also the social contexts of what their job situation is, what their house situation is, and all of those social contexts. And together, those three make up a person's well-being and a person's mental health.
Can you speak about what you're doing right now, like being a mental health social worker? What does your day-to-day involvement mean? Who do you see? What do you do with these people?
I am given a small collection of people to be responsible for. I have to get approval from my manager, everything I do. And a lot of my time at the moment is spent shadowing social workers, going into the community, finding what community outreach groups are available. So for example, what singing groups are there, what gardening groups are there, what painting groups are there that are free of charge for people to get involved in and become better connected with their community. Alongside that, I'm also working with a multidisciplinary team. So that means that I'm working with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a community psychiatric nurse, and a few other professionals. And it's my responsibility to bring together all of their expertise in their different fields and service the needs of the person who needs the care plan, the care package that we are putting together. It's a diverse range of people. I'm working in East London in the Hackney community, and essentially anyone is eligible for care as long as certain criteria are met. The role of the social worker is a statutory service that the government provides based on the Care Act of 2014, which says that if a person's well-being is at harm or their well-being or their safety is at harm, that they are eligible to be supported by the state. And the Care Act breaks down well-being into 14 factors. And if two of those factors are impacted, so those factors might be personal hygiene, it might be parenting responsibilities or financial support, any of those factors, if two of them are impacted, then someone becomes eligible for care. That's when a social worker like myself, would come in, assess someone's needs. And then as long as they meet that criteria, I then run a financial means test to see how much they can afford themselves and how much we need to provide and what the total cost of the package is. And then we build out the package, and it's my job to help them work towards their goals, focused on building those well-being factors back up to a point of stability.
You mentioned gardening or painting opportunities. Those are more kind of hands-on and creative activities. How do those activities help someone in need?
Multiple ways that they might help someone. If it's an activity like yoga or something that's really engaging the body, that can be very helpful for people who are recovering from trauma, to establish that they're in a safe space. Their body might be in positions that they previously felt uncomfortable in, but they're in a safe space, and they can start to build more muscle memory into that feeling of safety and stability. Meanwhile, groups like gardening or singing might be more about giving someone purpose in their community, perhaps also getting them outdoors, creating a bit of habits in terms of getting them out of the house, really engaging in their local community and feeling connected.
Speaking of free offerings addressing younger people, you are a EarKick ambassador, and we offer a free, completely anonymous and effortless app where people can monitor their mental health, track their progress, and find relief and a lot of content to improve their mental health and feel better. Can you speak a bit about why you decided to become an EarKick ambassador?
The fact that EarKick is free and that it's accessible to anyone with a phone on the App Store immediately breaks down this barrier that mental health is a luxury. I don't believe mental health is a luxury and that actually everyone has mental health. I got involved with EarKick because one of the main problems to do with mental health in the UK is the long waiting times we have for mental health services. That waiting time is really only a problem because people are in crisis when they're waiting for those services. And so why are people in crisis? Because people either don't have the resources to access mental health services earlier, or mental health is too stigmatized for people to access help before they really need help. The resources question and the stigma question, I feel, are both solved by EarKick's service. And that those two factors are really what I believe most mental health care really needs to champion. It. We need to reduce barriers to entry into the space, and then also help to reduce the stigma too.
You're doing your own portion to that. Your contribution is a mental health blog that is all about giving people the words to talk about mental health. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the blog is called If Not Now, When? And called that because I want to encourage people to be proactive about their mental health, which I think is also something that EarKick shares. Giving people the words to talk about their mental health, that idea comes from when something is stigmatized, that naturally means people don't talk about it. But because people aren't talking about it, doesn't mean people don't want to talk about it. And if people aren't talking about it, they don't really know what to say when actually the opportunity comes up. If they need to support someone or if they need to support themselves, often we don't know what to say. But if we have a reference, if we have a template, if we have something to copy and paste, then suddenly it becomes more accessible. People become more confident in talking about mental health. Every Wednesday, I post a new idea related to something to do with mental health. And I spell that Wednesday with a WH to align with If Not Now, When. And it's also then about building the habit of mental health, which I believe is also something that EarKick is really aligned with.
Now, when we talk about something being a stigma or being kind of difficult to talk about and to live out, immediately workplace mental health comes to mind. And I know you have had your share of experience with workplace mental health. Maybe you can speak to that.
I perhaps wouldn't be as far along in my journey without the private healthcare that came with my previous workplace. And with that package was a certain amount of care that I could use in whichever way I wanted. And I chose to use that towards therapy, which I found incredibly valuable, and was a resource which, had I not been in that workplace, wouldn't have been available to me. I wouldn't have been able to afford it without that package. I also think the idea of mental health in the workplace also comes into this space of resilience. Sometimes that word resilience comes with its own stigma, where people feel like it's about suppression and building tolerance to stress until burnout is reached. I know about ways to unwind and to balance that workplace mental health with mental health outside of the workplace. So for me, that means kind of exercising, eating well, painting in my spare time. What was new about therapy when I started down that path? It felt very natural to be able to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about to someone who was really listening and who was experienced and a professional in this space. So immediately from the first session, it felt right. And it kind of felt like I had been missing this for a while. And then I suppose the other main new thought or new aspect I realized was that with therapy, for the first 5 or 6 sessions, I didn't really know what my intention was. I had kind of started this because I thought there's no harm, it can only help. But therapy inherently involves a lot of self-scrutiny. You're putting yourself underneath the microscope. And so analyzing yourself that way without an intention can sometimes be a bit scary. So after like 5 or 6 sessions, I realized that actually I didn't need much of an intention. It was only a small objective that I needed, but just the objective of I want to understand myself better was enough to let myself relax and ease into the therapy.
You're talking about something so important, wanting to know yourself better. And at the beginning of wanting to know and being able to know yourself better is measurement. At EarKick, we do measure and track, whatever belongs to your life, to see what the difference is when you start having a goal, when you work towards a goal, what kind of support you get, and how your body and mind reacts to that. Now, we've spoken before about mental health being kind of something that's not attractive. And both you and I want to change that, because it's an asset to have bagged therapy, or to have had a coach, or to know more about CBT, or to have all these wonderful skills. Can you speak about the fact of making mental health something that is cool, something that is as wonderful as having good teeth or being a sportive person?
The first step towards knowing about something and knowing about yourself is being able to measure it. And when you can measure something, then you can manage something. I think one of the really great aspects about EarKick is that it makes your mental health visible in a way that otherwise it isn't visible. And I think often, because mental health is so wrapped up with feelings and emotions, when you're feeling a certain emotion, that feels infinite at that moment. And you forget that actually yesterday or last week or last month, you were feeling a very different way. And so having, for example, that visibility with EarKick, being able to see your trajectory really helps remind us of the bigger picture. If we aren't aware of our triggers, if we're not aware of what causes our heart rate to increase, or when we feel like something is a high pressure situation, then we are only ever reacting to that. We're on the back foot, we're on the defense. That basically means we're not in control. Being proactive with our mental health, trying to measure it, trying to manage it, is about giving us more control over something that previously has been a field where we've seen it as something that we don't have much control over. To speak to making mental health more attractive, this is one of the main difficulties with something that is stigmatized, but because it's something that everyone does experience to different degrees, it's definitely possible. So with the blog, I take the angle of there can be edgy ideas that we can bring to mental health. It's not always about the same tips that we go through and all the rest. Making mental health more attractive and more appealing, in some ways more viral, more shareable. I feel like I'll speak with the examples of the blog that I've been aiming for, because the purpose of If Not Now When is to destigmatize mental health. And so to destigmatize, we need to get people to share. People share when there are emotions involved, when people are either getting excited, they're in awe, maybe they're in shock. Mental health is so personal. My writing has been about designing a space so that people can bring their own perspectives, but also trying to make it edgy, trying to make it like controversial, that these ideas maybe aren't ideas people associate with mental health, but actually they really are. And in that sense, trying to expand the definition of what people assume mental health is. I think a lot of the time people think of mental health as anxiety and depression and when we have a problem, and actually it includes a much wider, colorful picture than that.
True, and that also is true for mental health at work. And EarKick is moving into the enterprise field because employees, they spend a lot of time at work. And as you said, it's both. It's what happens at home is what happens at work that influences how they feel, how they act, how productive they are, how relaxed. And on the other side, you have these HR experts and chief people leaders who are trying to figure out, to get to know the single employee, to get to know whether the mental health impact is from outside, from the family, from relationships, or whether there's a manager that's behaving in a toxic way. So we're trying to shine a light on what exactly are drivers, as you mentioned before.
Events and factors that happen outside the workplace can impact the workplace, and events that happen inside the workplace can affect our home life and life external to work. I feel like that definition of mental health is something that it's very complex. There are multiple factors that impact someone's well-being, and just having one or two of those factors drop can impact everything else, or can impact the rest of their life. We don't have a very detailed picture on how all of those small changes can have a big impact, but with services like EarKick's, where we're starting to gather data, and over time that data accumulates, suddenly we have a much richer picture to make evaluations on, and hopefully can help to make a real difference about preventing stuff before it actually happens. One of the main challenges for mental health services in the UK is that it's very difficult to prove that an intervention stopped something from happening in the future. If it never happens in the future, how did something in the past make that not happen? So that is one of the difficulties about measuring mental health and measuring the impact of early interventions for mental health, but it's also part of the joy of it, and we're only just getting started.